Good afternoon. This is our second in our three-part series on Mussar and Middot. I want to thank Kira Malamed-Vainberg, who is our producer this week. We're so lucky and happy to have her, and want to welcome everyone back. I'm excited to see you. Some of you were with us last week, some were not. I'm just going to give a quick overview and a little bit of reflection on how this is being taught over the 3 weeks. So it's good to see everyone. I hope everyone is well and good. Judaism, because it is so old, thousands and thousands of years old, when you have something relatively new, and again, you're talking about a couple hundred years new, like Mussar, there's a lot of freshness to it. And with, like anything new in Judaism, for example, Reform Judaism or when rabbis or whatever, there's controversy and things like that. So just a reminder, Mussar is a branch of Judaism. It's out of the 1800s, and it's a study of a certain series of what are known as Middot, or measures, or ethical points of view, that it is understood one can improve oneself and focus on these different what are called Middot, or measures, that you can help restore balance. We're going to delve into one specifically, the one of Anavav, humility, in a little bit. But before we do that, I just want to reflect back a little bit on the study of Mussar. It was considered somewhat controversial when it began in Europe with Rabbi Israel Salanter, because it was seen as very modern. And as you know, in the Jewish world, especially in the more traditional communities, anything modern is not viewed as desirable. And then what happened is those who were studying Mussar and leaders in Mussar, many were killed in the Holocaust. So whatever practitioners of Mussar that there were in Europe, many died in the Holocaust. There's been a revival kind of post-World II, and again now, today. If you were with us last week, you learned from Leslie Ann Copes-Fink, who is part of the staff of the Mussar Institute, which was founded by Alan Moranis. I'm not sure if he's a rabbi or not, but Alan Moranis. We hope to do more with them in the future, and we'll keep you posted about that, because this is just an amazing field that we're in. So last week we had Leslie teach, who is really full-time in the Mussar world. Next week, Rabbi Amy Pessa will teach, who has studied Mussar over the years. This week, I'm teaching. I'm a relative newbie to Mussar. I'm teaching a Mussar curriculum to our teens in the fall. And one of the things I love about that is that you have 3 different teachers over the 3 different weeks at different levels of interaction with Mussar, which is a reminder to each and every one of us that there's always the potential to start to study anything in Judaism, but particularly this branch. And I want to start by sharing a quote, not a Jewish quote actually, but a quote from Anne Lamott. Kira, how's that looking on the screen? Are we good? Okay. So Anne Lamott, who's an amazing writer, wrote a book called Bird by Bird. And when I started studying Mussar and then having to teach Mussar, this quote came to mind. So Phyllis, do you mind unmuting and reading the quote? Are you able to do that? I'm going to have you unmute. Go ahead.
Okay. 30 years ago, my older brother, who was 10 years old at the time, was trying to get a report written on birds that he'd had 3 months to write, which was due the next day. We were out at our family cabin in Bolinas, and he was at the kitchen table close to tears, surrounded by binder paper and pencils and unopened books about birds, immobilized by the hugeness of the task ahead. Then my father sat down beside him, put his arm around my brother's shoulder, and said, "Bird by bird, buddy, just take it bird by bird."
I love that quote, because if you've started anything new, whether it's learning the Hebrew alphabet or studying for a real estate exam, some of you are realtors who are here, or whatever you've done, it's piece by piece. And one of the things that I love about Mussar is because these Middot, or these measures that exist, you just take it one by one. But what I'm going to do today, and Kira, I'll have you share the first slide, the chart, is I want to just show you something that was created, which I think is really helpful in order to understand how you can interact with Mussar, this ethical part of Judaism, and figure out what you need to work at. So you're probably familiar, if you took any science in school, with the periodic table. And it's a way to lay out various gases and elements and things like that in a table so that you see them in an organized way. So this Mussar organization took the different Middot, or measures, the aspects of our personhood that we could all work on, and they put it into this chart. And I know it can be overwhelming, but what I want you to do right now is just focus on one square. And I want you to find one square which is something that really resonates with you, something that like you're really good at, or you're really resonant with, or like you were just born that way, like your default is that. And so just take a moment and look at this periodic table of different Middot, and take a minute to scan and see which one of these boxes is something where you're like, oh, that's me, in a second. I'm looking at on this day, there's different things I connect with on different days, but reverence and awe. I was just talking about this to someone, like I have like a fear of authority, and I have awe at like just the existence of the world and my children's talents, and that, we get to live in this world and just the beauty that's out there. So I'd say like reverence and awe is probably what I would gravitate towards right now. Like that's a space where like I live, I think, as often as I can. And if I'm having a bad day, it's probably because I'm not living in reverence and awe. So feel free to either put in the chat or unmute or raise your hand and let me know what is something that like that's your wheelhouse, like that's your thing. That's like something that you totally resonate with. Is there any one of these Middot? Joy. Yeah, Susan Goldstein is so full of joy. I agree with that. Susan's our sister co-president, and she's always a smile, joy, a zest for life and living. I'm so glad you put that. I resonate with you saying that 110%. I wish I could have this joy, compassion. Phyllis, oh, that's beautiful. This compassion, kindness. Judy, oh, how wonderful. That's really wonderful. That's great to see. Gratitude, Susan. Fabulous. That's great. Phil, but I don't know for you, if curiosity, I would say, like, I always think of you as like thinking about the next thing or what's out there or things like that. I don't know if anyone understanding. Beautiful. Fantastic. So these are things. Now think about if you're having an off day or a day where you're like in a bad mood or just things aren't going well, think about, like, is it a day where there's a lack of joy or where you weren't kind to someone? I find if I'm in the car and I'm in a bad mood, like I'm probably not appreciating the world around me. I'm probably not having awe. And once I can reassess and rebalance, then I can get back to being in a better place. That's where my balance exists. A little bit later with relation to humility, we'll look at a specific chart that shows the balance. Susan, do you have your hand up or are you just showing your finger? Okay. Now I'm going to ask for a more difficult thing to do. And this is like, going to a space that's sometimes hard for us. What are you not so great at? What on this do you sometimes need to work on? What is not your forte that exists on this chart? So take a minute to look. And patience. Susan's there right away, so she knew it. That's there. I would say, God, there's well, if it's related to food, probably willpower. It doesn't always work so much. I think related to other things, I'm looking confidence. Wow. Yeah, I could resonate with that as well. What else? Contentment, calm, and composure, I think, are both leadership. Judy, okay, interesting. I'd say calm and composure. That I call that New Yorker in me comes out sometimes. I get overexcited. Fabulous. So what Mussar would say to you, and Kira, you can stop sharing. Thank you so much. Confidence. So what Mussar would say to you is that you should be drawn to the things that you need to work on. And it's funny, it's related to even my study of Mussar. A few years ago, I had some time to study, and I said to Rabbi Levin, I said, oh, should I go study Mussar? And he's like, well, that's not really something, it's not my default to want to study it. And so I didn't. And then there was a Mussar for Teens class, which I talked about last week, which is how I came into it. And I love it. I love it so much, but it's something that it's not my default to go in this way. If you saw Leslie's style last week, she was very calm, very meditative, very, I don't know if spiritual is the right word or what. It's not my MO for sure. But once you stop and go into that place that you are not familiar with, sometimes it can be so refreshing. So for those of you who said confidence, maybe it's going into a space of leadership, that is new to you, but you realize like you can do amazing things in that place of patience. If you say, I found with age, certainly I think my patience gotten better, though not always. So what Mussar would say to you is like, great. If you have love down, or if you have, awe down, then that's something you can delve into. But like what you really need to do is delve into the things that aren't so natural to you. And what we'll look at now is this aspect of humility. I want to just introduce you to the concept of humility, show you the chart, and then step back and just talk about the purpose of Mussar. Actually, let's start with this quote about the purpose of Mussar. So I'm going to just share a quote from Alan Moranis, who is the founder of the Mussar Institute. And then we'll go to Anava, or humility, which is what we're going to look at today, that Middot. So Philip, are you able to read? Is it large enough on the screen? Are you able to unmute and read?
Yes.
I'll move it down. Go ahead. The purpose.
Okay. The purpose of Mussar is to help you identify your spiritual curriculum, and then to give you the tools that will help you consciously and effectively engage with the inner work that lies before you. Mussar is summarized in the phase Tikkun Middot HaNefesh, improving or remedying the traits of the soul, and it takes some focused effort over a period of time to bring about this rectification. Put simply, practice is how you work on and master your spiritual curriculum.
All right, Phil, I'm going to have you stop. Philip, I'm going to have you read next. But before we go forward, I want you to think about when you take a class, you're taking a class to learn. And when you begin the class, you get a curriculum. So for example, I'm not going to take third grade math. I probably could use third grade math, but I'm not going to take it because it's not the class I need to be taking right now. So I don't need a curriculum from that. When you create your spiritual curriculum, you are creating the points that you need to learn, that you need to work on. Like, Phil, when did you have to get recertified when you came to Florida for real estate? Right? So
it was absolutely horrible.
Right. So you had to take a test. So you needed a class or something, a curriculum to help you see what points were different in Florida than that were different in the Northeast where you had. And it sounds like it was very tough.
It was 180 hours or something.
Oh my God. Wow. That's a lot. That's really a lot. So that is the point with Mussar, to go to the difficult. If you have a curriculum, it means you're something that you have not mastered yet that you need to learn. And so with Mussar, that's why we're pushed to the things that we need to work on. So Philip, will you keep reading Mussar aims?
Okay. Mussar aims to help you close the gap between your ideals and the life you actually lead. This convergence is brought about one step at a time through practice. Practice doesn't involve seeking out some sort of spiritual generator to fill you with light, because all the holiness you need already lives within. Instead, practice focuses on recalibrating specific soul traits that are obstructing your soul's light from shining into your life.
So one of the things I love about Mussar is that all the tools are contained inside. And when you look at a certain text or do a certain exercise, like a meditation or a reflection, all of a sudden you have the tools to help restore balance, right? Middot are like measures, like on that old kind of fashioned scale. You imagine two sides. A Middot is a measure. You have the tools to restore balance. It's there. I like this example they give from Abraham, because it tells you, it says the things that we need to work on are the things that we need to go towards. So, for example, when Abraham, the first Jew, when you look at his life, all the tests that he had nothing to do with chesed, with loving kindness. He was this loving, kind person. The tests he was tested on were strengths, right? Like sacrificing his son, like giving his wife off to Pharaoh, like of being the first person, to have the beliefs that were different, to stand out, to educate his nephew Lot. And Philip, if you'll just read this last paragraph here, each test.
Each test we face is a rung on the ladder of spiritual life. And as you pass or fail your tests, you rise or descend spiritually. I call the moment of test arises in the midst of your of real life Mussar work. Mussar practice is how we prepare for our inevitable encounters with Mussar work.
And Kira, if you'll cue up that second video in a second, I just want to say, I say, Phyllis, do you have a comment or a question? Or okay. I just want to say this is true. You will find that the more you study this, that you will get in a situation and you'll be like, wait, this is one of the traits that I need to work on. And you might handle it differently than you might have otherwise before. It's really remarkable. Again, it's like the first time you study it, it's not going to be life-changing. Though I have to say, I heard from more people after last week's class than I normally hear after Lunch and Learn. So this is obviously tapping into something. And if we do this Mussar Institute curriculum, which I'm hoping we'll do in the fall or the spring, it's taught by professionals from the Mussar Institute. It can be really it can be soul changing in the best way possible. It can, Judaism, I think, is always trying to give us the tools to make us a better person. And what is nice about Mussar is it's packaged in a way where it's easy access. It's a doorway that's right there, especially if you have a good teacher. We're going to watch an 8-minute video right now that Kira's going to share that's going to reflect on the bigger picture. And then we're going to delve into Anava, humility. So, Kira, take it away. Thank you.
There are 7 billion, well, actually 7.1 billion humans on the planet. And each one of us has a unique character. So what determines your character? You do, and all the people around you. And of course, some genetics too. But there's new science proving that if you focus on certain parts of who you are, you can develop your character and ultimately live a more meaningful, successful, and happy life, no matter what your circumstances. I mean, isn't that what we're all trying to figure out? This whole idea about developing our character really took shape in 2004, when 2 psychologists suggested that instead of just focusing on all the things that can go wrong with us, it's also important to celebrate all the things that can go right. You see, they look throughout history to identify core virtues that humans across cultures have agreed lead to a meaningful life. And then they identified 24 character strengths that, when practiced and developed, could lead to these virtues. And they organized them, like scientists have done throughout history to understand things better. These groundbreaking studies showed that every person is a unique combination of these strengths. Like for me, I'm high on curiosity. I could work a little on the prudence. Actually, what is prudence? Anyhow, one of the most interesting parts of all this is they found that if we focus on building upon the strengths we have, it has a lasting effect on our happiness and well-being. So think about it. What are your top 5 strengths? Now, another part of this is that you can help shape other people's character too. They found that the key to human relationships is ultimately appreciating the character strengths in others. To explore this, we asked people around the world, who do you admire and why?
I admire my mother the most because she's very loving and caring.
Восхищаюсь целеустремленными людьми, которые готовы бороться за свою цель.
The person I admire the most is Einstein, of course.
My sister, because she is so tough and so brave.
People who use their creative energy to make the world a better place.
This powerful new framework paved the way for a whole new era of social science that, it turns out, is unpacking a very old idea. So how do we develop these character strengths? One theory suggests that people either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is the belief that we're born with certain abilities, intelligence, and talents, and we're stuck with it. A growth mindset is believing I can change. If I set my mind to it, I can do anything. Let's take, for example, failing at something. With a fixed mindset, failing means I'm a failure. A growth mindset understands failure happens to everyone. Of course, it's hard, I've been there, but it's also something to learn from, something to improve upon. Fortunately, we can all develop a growth mindset. It takes practice and it takes encouragement from the people around us, but it can be learned. And it's all because of an amazing part of the human brain called the prefrontal cortex. It's like our brain's control panel that orchestrates our thoughts and actions. What many scientists call executive functions. Or what neuroscientist Adele Diamond, calls self-regulations. I like to think of it as my self-control filter, the thing that keeps my impulses and emotions in check. And the way to strengthen that filter is as simple as taking a moment, focusing your attention, and asking yourself, is what I'm about to do a reflection of who I am and who I want to be? So while we're all becoming more and more distracted in this age of distraction, we need to remember to take a moment and think. There are a lot of new exciting conversations happening about character. One that I find interesting is that there are 7 strengths in particular that can be real game changers in academic achievement, success, and happiness, no matter what your circumstances. Those 7 are optimism, gratitude, social intelligence, curiosity, self-control, enthusiasm, and perseverance, also known as grit. While there have been many different theories about character throughout history, what scientists in this field agree on is that character matters, and that character strengths can be learned, practiced, and cultivated. So when you think about yourself, what are your strengths? And how can you find ways to use them more in your home, work, school, and community? It's like you have these superpowers, and focusing your attention on them makes them stronger. And then if you focus on the people around you and their strengths, it makes them stronger too. As each of us becomes our best versions of ourselves and encourages others to do the same, we can lead to important changes throughout the world. Just imagine a world infused with more humanity, justice, courage, wisdom, and compassion. So if you can be a better version of yourself, how do you want to be?
I definitely want to be somebody that other people can feel they can rely on.
A man who was courageous.
Somebody who went for their goals.
As a risk taker.
Kind.
Exactly like my mom. Beautiful, strong, and powerful.
I want people to say that I'm funny.
Who is a nice person.
Música.
Generous.
Be yourself.
Kind.
Accountable.
Incondicional.
Jamás echar el amor, sí.
También sensible.
Profesional.
Charismática.
I want to become someone who, when the time comes for me to die, I go, oh my goodness, I have used it up. I have wrung it dry.
Everybody is a star. They just need to learn how to shine.
Thanks so much, Kira. So if you notice, there was not a Jewish word that was said in there. So what happened with the study of Mussar post 21st century, because you could say post Holocaust, but really I would say in the last few years, is one of the reasons that it is becoming more and more popular is because think about the things that keep people from delving further into Jewish study. They feel they don't know Hebrew, or they're not familiar, or they don't remember things they learned as a kid, or they didn't learn enough, or they're not knowledgeable. But Mussar only asks you to be knowledgeable about yourself. Now, there's a vocabulary in Hebrew for sure, and we'll see with humility in a second that there is a vocabulary and there are words, but if you know the word in English or Hebrew, it doesn't matter. What Tiffany Schlein is saying in that document is the same. So any questions or comments before we go on to humility? Okay. If you do, feel free to unmute and share with me if you do. Okay. So anava is the Hebrew word for humility. And how it is understood in the Mussar realm is how much space you are taking up right now. So just for a moment, I want you to think about what are you aware of right now, right? Like, what are you feeling? Like some of you are eating, so you feel food in your mouth. My feet are throbbing because I'm wearing nice shoes because I had a funeral today. So I'm conscious of my feet hurting a little bit because I'm wearing my less comfortable but nicer shoes today, right? So just like for a second, like feel what you feel. I'm a little hungry. I might be a little thirsty and my feet are throbbing. That everything else is pretty quiet. Just for a second, be with your body and feel where are you in a space where you're totally comfortable? Are you at work? Are you at home? Are you at a third space, like a Starbucks or something like that? Like, how do you feel where you are? And how much space are you taking up in that place? So remember, we keep talking about this Middot or this measure or this balance. The Mussar Institute, when they share that concept, they share it as a chart like this. So the ideal place to be, are you able to see my cursor on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So if you are balanced, if you think about the way scales are balanced, you are here, right? If you have too much negative self-image, you are off kilter and you go here. And if you have too much arrogance, you go here. So I want to show you an example what is understood as the perfect kind of balance. This is a text. There's a great professor, you might have heard of him, he's since passed away, Eugene Borowitz, who taught at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in New York, is my professor. Rabbi Dan, he worked with on his thesis. He articulated, it was a Lurianic, a concept from a couple of hundred years earlier, but he articulated it in a book about Jewish education in 1974, this concept of Tzimtzum. And it has such power in the Jewish world, especially among Jewish leaders, that it is often a text that is taught. If you have a gathering of Jewish leaders, this will be a text that will be taught, because it's understanding how to be a leader. Because you have some people who are leaders or rabbis or educators, whoever, who will come in and they will take all the oxygen out of the room. Have you ever had that experience where you come to learn with someone and there's just no room for anything but them and their ego and their opinions, and there's no space, right? And then there's other people who are I would say meek or are just like so insecure that they're not conveying good teaching at all. And what Borowitz talked about is this contemporary modern, it's modern-ish, again, 400 years old is modern in Judaism, of Tzimtzum, of withdrawing, of bringing to yourself. So Susan, are you able to unmute? Susan Schultz, are you able to unmute and read you're an educator, so this will be of interest to you. In 1974, if you're able to read those two paragraphs.
In 1974, Borowitz wrote Tzimtzum, a mystic model for contemporary leadership. Tzimtzum means contraction and refers to God's act at the beginning of creation, according to the Lurianic Kabbalists. Mystics believe that God brought the world into being by withdrawing, making room for development, growth, freedom, and dignity. God did not just create human beings as objects of God's power. God created human beings as dignified co-creators who would be left with space to complete God's universe to kin alone. Borowitz developed this idea to applying Tzimtzum to all areas of leadership. He suggests that power is best wielded as guidance and not action, that effective leading means not acting in place of others, but pulling back while guiding others. Rather than taking care of a project because we best know how to do the task, we make an extra effort to take a less experienced leader under our wing and guide them in taking on this responsibility.
Okay, so think about anything in your life where your role has changed. For example, parents, right? When you are young, your parents take care of you. And then there's a period of time when you become independent from your parents. There's that in-between time, right? Where you're still, somewhat, like I still pay my son's car payment and insurance, but he has a job in Los Angeles, there's that. And then there's a time where he'll handle a lot of that stuff. And then there'll come a day, he'll need to take care of me. So we know as human beings, we're able to change who we are based on what we need to do. Sometimes we need to pull more. If our children are over dependent on us, we might need to pull back and say, you're going to fill the space, or we might need to come in extra, like you seem to need my help more, or with our parents or with anyone. So we're not static. We're able to change. We're able to withdraw and expand based on what's needed. Susan deals as sister and co-president. Susan deals with this all the time, because there's some things with sister that are 100% on her and her co-president's shoulders, and some things just give it and go. And then you have to kind of calibrate event by event, right? Same with a bar mitzvah prep. If you have some kids, they just got it. They write that speech, they got those prayers down, they're practicing on the day they're ready to go. And there's some where you have to bribe them with Starbucks or whatever and be what they need to be. And what Mussar acknowledges is we can change, right? We can change. And it's about reflecting. So stopping and reflecting on where are places or moments where in relation to humility, where you feel like you're just right. You just have the right balance of things, like where you really feel like things are just right and good. I would say, I mean, Kira's on, she can disagree if she wants, but I think in our clergy team, it's a beautiful thing where like we just all have different skills and talents, but we work together. I mean, I'm just thinking about it because I just had a funeral with Lori, and she needed bug spray. We were outside and I had 2 bug sprays in my car, and I gave it to her, and I laughed because I was like, that's so us. Like, oh, you need this, I have it. You know, you need this, you need that. With Alana coming out, like we're just helping. There's just like, I don't know, Kira, if you want to agree or disagree, but I think,
totally agree. That's what I love about our team.
Yeah, there's just like a beautiful balance in that center place. And then there's some things that are in our life that are imbalanced, that just aren't right. For some people, that's with finances. Some people, that's dealing with family. For some people, that's work situations. I don't know if anything comes to mind for anyone where they're like their right space, like where they feel really great. Like Philip, when you're showing a house, right? As a realtor, does that feel like are you just in that, like in the zone when you're in that space?
Yeah, that's probably the one time that I like it the most. Not when all the problems start, which they inevitably do, but the showing part is fun because you're taking people into other people's homes and showing them inside their lives, inside their bedrooms, inside of wherever room it is, and what they have for dinner, what books they have on their shelves, and all that kind of stuff. And people do that, and it's interesting, and and particularly if people like the property, you like it even better. But that's another story. But it's I think it's probably the most fun part of the job, I would say.
That's awesome. Anything else comes to mind of places where you're taking up the right amount of space, where it feels natural and good?
I believe, this is Susan Schultz. I believe in the team approach. And I, own a business, and there's 8 of us that meet virtually as a team. And my theory is no one's right, no one's wrong. Every idea is good. I think I've said this before. Every idea is good for now, later, or changed in a certain way. So that's my theory.
Yeah, and to be part of a team, you have to calibrate where the rest of the team is. I think that's great. I think, Susan, you muted. I don't know if you're still talking or not, but you're muted now. Okay, you were done. Okay. Any space where you feel like small, where you feel like you walk into this space and you're like, oh, this is daunting or overwhelming. I will tell you, I feel this way, even though I've been here 20 years, like there's some luncheons here, these like luncheons that happen, there's like 200 or 400 or 800 people. I find them daunting and overwhelming. Ultimately, eventually I'll see a congregate, but like when I first walk in, and even in that morning, I'll worry and I'll stress. It feels overwhelming.
This is Susan again. When I get to that spot, I push myself. I force myself because I say, I don't have a choice. I have to, deal with this in order to stay strong. And when I deal with something that seems overwhelming and I succeed, which I do just from sheer persistence, then it gives me the strength to continue. And I think especially, and I've mentioned this before, it's a test, a COVID test. I live in a house by myself. And if I didn't tell myself this every day, I don't know what would happen.
Yeah.
And ideally, I encourage others also to say, you can do that. And the more you do whatever it is, the stronger you get. And
that's amazing. That's naturally Mussar. So you're defaulted that way. That's great. That's great.
Grown 10 inches. I said, I'm going to be taller and stronger. Yes.
I want to show you, because I think it's a really beautiful example of that. Let me just go back to so you see the scales, the extreme of negative self-image here, on the end. Kira, if you'll cue. Susan, go ahead. I see your hand up. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that when I teach Spanish, I feel like I'm in my element. I feel good.
Beautiful.
I see when the students are saying, aha, they get it.
Fabulous.
It's a rewarding situation.
Fabulous. I want to show you. So if you're familiar with Dear Evan Hansen, it was a Broadway musical. It's turned into a movie. It's about a kid with very, very, very low self-esteem that kind of creates a story that makes him popular, and then it all kind of crumbles. And it's just about 2 minutes. It's one of the opening scenes of the movie, and it's the director's cut, so you'll actually hear the commentary about how the scene is created. And has anyone seen it, Dear Evan Hansen? I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's amazing. It's really, really amazing. It's painful but beautiful, very modern Broadway musical, and it comes here. You will see that negative self-esteem piece to the nth degree. You will really see someone who just is invisible completely. That total, the opposite of like arrogance you see here. So Kira, let's share that now.
I'm Stephen Chbosky. I am the director of the film adaptation of Dear Evan Hansen. Step out of the sun if you keep getting burned. What we're looking at here is Ben Platt reprising his role that he made famous on Broadway of Evan Hansen. And in this moment in the film, we've met Evan already in his bedroom, where he has more than communicated how much anxiety that he carries with him. We're learning that this is the first day of school. We're learning like just the voices in his head, and he just spins out. And he started singing this wonderful song called Waving Through a Window. What is distinct about this scene is that he's actually, if you look at like what's actually happening, even though he is singing, what the singing in this moment represents is a thought in his head. He's not actually talking. You know, in the real world, like he's not talking right now. He's not actually singing it, like walking through a hallway. If you notice, none of the people around him are dancing. It's not High School Musical. There's no performance. It's just he's alone in the world. When you fall in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? And everything that we shot, we wanted to show how he's kind of lost in the world and how no one pays attention to him. And that this entire song is a thought in his head, and in a lot of ways, it's like a cry for help. There was visual choreography. And even though the people in the hallways are not dancing, there are certain things that are hit. Like there's locker slams sometimes on the beat, or there's like social media, which is an omnipresent part of the story, that are happening sometimes on the beat and sometimes it's happening slightly off. So all these things always go back to the kind of the noise in his head. It was choreographed, but not in the traditional musical sense. It was really choreographed to his emotions. That was always the main thing, the emotions. Where is he living? What does this mean? How does it affect him emotionally?
And that's a movie. You're able to see the movie. But I think I like the Broadway play as well. It's, if you have a chance to see it, the music's just incredible, and the story's incredible and painful, but beautiful. But that's the example of the opposite of arrogance. You have such lack of personhood there, and how do you get to that middle space? Why is humility important? I want to share this again. It's from Alan Moranis, who's the head of the Mussar Institute, about why looking at humility is important when you're studying Mussar here. Let's see. Judy, would you like to read?
Where your curriculum begins. I've emphasized that, I have emphasized that your interior world is the realm of soul, and the soul traits that are turned up too high or too low define your spiritual curriculum. But where to start the course? In Duties of the Heart, Rabbi Bachya Ibn Pakuda helps direct our attention by posing a question: on what do the virtues depend? His answer is clear. All virtues and duties are dependent on humility. This is a principle later Mussar teachers have endorsed. The first leg of the spiritual journey involves the cultivation of humility. The importance they place on humility is underlined in the Talmud, where we read, "One who sacrifices a whole offering shall be rewarded for a whole offering. One who offers a burnt offering shall have the reward of a burnt offering. But one who offers humility to God and man shall be rewarded with a reward as if he had offered all the sacrifices in the world. As it is written, a contrite and humble spirit is a sacrifice to God. God does not ignore a broken heart."
And Susan Goldstein, do you want to read the rest? The Mussar stresses.
Mussar teachers stress that humility is a primary soul trait to work on because it entails an unvarnished and honest assessment of who you are. Without this accurate self-awareness, nothing else in your inner life will come into focus in its true measure. And it is no accident that the word that means soul trait in Hebrew is midah, which literally does mean measure. Without humility, either you will be so puffed up with arrogance that you won't even see what really needs some work, or you will be so deflated and lacking in self-esteem that you will despair of being able to make the changes that are lit up so glaringly in your self-critical mind. Ooh.
So according to this, we start with humility. Why? It's if you think about how a house is built or an apartment building is built, there has to be a foundation. And if your foundation either is so full of arrogance that there's no room for anyone else, or so weak, as we saw in Dear Evan Hansen with the Ben Platt figure, nothing can be built on it. So who do we look to for the model of humility? None other than our main man, Moses. And in Numbers 12, it says, "And the man Moses was more humble than any other person on the face of the earth." Now, it's so funny because it sounds kind of braggadocious because like, oh, the greatest at being humble is Moses. But he really was. If you think about that balance, that back and forth that Moses has to play, where he has this relationship with God, but it's not so strong that, Moses wants more than anything to go into the land of Israel at the end of Torah. God won't let him. So Moses doesn't have such great arrogance to know God will put him in his place. At the same time, God called upon Moses 5 times to lead the Jewish people. He said no. Finally, he said yes, because he was so humble. So it didn't work to expect that Moses could control things. It had to be God. And it didn't work for Moses to say no. And all through Torah, if you look at Moses through new eyes, you'll see Moses calibrates himself all the time. Sometimes he's like super close with God. And that beautiful piece we sing at the high holidays, Adonai, Adonai, Rachum v'chanun Adonai, is that moment when Moses begs God, these people are driving me crazy because they just built the golden calf. Let me see your back. And God says, let me see you. And God says, well, you'll let me see my back. And then Moses has this beautiful thing. So and then there's other times where God's totally mad at Moses, like when he hits a rock in order to get water out, when he was told just to talk to the rock. And there's some times where Moses is just held on the Most High. the time when he's held the highest is when he dies. And the last words of Torah say there was never a prophet like Moses in all of Israel. So Moses is really an incredible example of how you can change and recalibrate and do things. Now, Rav Kook, who was the first chief rabbi of the modern day state of Israel, said, at times, we should not be afraid of the feeling of greatness, which elevates a person to do great things. And all humility is based on such a holy feeling of greatness. I don't know if anything comes to mind to you for this. I think bar mitzvah, the concept of bar mitzvah, is the epitome of this phrase. Because if you think about, a 12-year-old, a lot of the world is like working against them. It's tough. Middle school is tough. But the Jewish world says, you are the most important person. We're going to train you. We're going to sit with you. We're going to tutor you. We're going to study you. And all of them love it, right? So it's not necessarily received well, but that's part of having a 12-year-old brain and growing and where. But the Jewish world says to the 12, 13-year-old, you are the most important person in the world. And when you become bar mitzvah, you're going to leave that. So you're saying to someone, you are great. And that feeling of greatness lets them do great things. I don't know if it's ever been studied or not, that just the process of studying for bar and bat mitzvah, I think it just helps you with life and learning. I think it just is an incredible thing that just teaches you skills for life and learning. I want to show you before we end with our final quote, because one of the things I do love about Mussar, and especially the Mussar Institute, which is definitely not coming from an Orthodox only perspective. I'm sure there are Orthodox people around there in their realm. But one of the things I love about the Mussar Institute is the concrete that comes out of it, because I think there are certain things that we can study and be like, okay, so now what? But with Mussar, there are really things like the next time you feel like that kind of want to crawl under a rock, that feeling like Evan Hansen, feeling invisible, what can you do to change the situation? Or the next time you're feeling impatient with someone, what can you do? So from the Mussar Institute, just some things related to humility, some mantras, I guess, are the best word to say. Hineni, here I am, which is often a word that a biblical character will speak to God when God is going to speak to them. This rhyming, no more than my place, no less than my space. It's beautiful. No more than my place, no less than my space. The world was created for me. I am but dust and ashes. And this comes from the Midrash that everyone should have in their pocket. 2 notes. One, that for my sake, the world was created. And in the other pocket, I am but dust and ashes, that balance that we're doing all the time. And then, just some concrete, real things that you can do, making sure you give credit where credit is due, playing with different ways of approaching things. I do a lot of women empowerment and things like that. And so a couple months ago, I had some of the senior female leadership of the staff over just to say just to be together. Cause I was like, you know what? I think I'm one of the oldest women on the staff, and which is just hard to get out of my mouth, but it's true. And so thinking about that and what that means and how I act and how I paved the way and, the things that I dealt with maybe, 20, 30 years ago that, I hope women won't have to deal with. So taking a risk and trying different things or different behaviors, and also reflecting the times when it's good, the times when it does work. And it does do well. I don't know if anything, before I share the last quote, does anything come to mind of a situation or a behavior or an action that you can take that you might walk away with from this day? Maybe maybe in your work realm or in your family realm or
I have one, Rabbi.
Go ahead.
To take away the fact that think about what I'm going to do, and is this a good thing to do or not?
That's a great thing. That's a great thing to think about. I agree. I think that when we don't stop and think, I find like when I get short with my kids, like if I get annoyed or frustrated or upset with them, it's because like I just have to take a second and think and stop and breathe and think about it in that way. It's great. It's just Mussar is giving space for that. Again, it's your spiritual curriculum. The final quote I just want to share is a beautiful thing from the 1500s. A small deed done in humility is 1,000 times more acceptable to God than a great deed done in pride. That when we act the way we are in the world, that we have to do it with humility. And I think that if humility is the foundation of Mussar, that and we figure out how to calibrate ourselves so we're in that right space. And I'll go back to the chart just to end with, if we go back to that right space that's in the middle here, sorry, with the, let me get you there. There's our chart. Here we go. If you lie in this space here between humility and positive self-esteem in the middle, in a good space, then you will know when there's situations where you should pull back a little bit and there's situations where you should come forward a little bit. You'll learn how to travel along that line. But like everything, moderation is best. You never want to be totally here and you never want to be totally here. And that's the beauty of Mussar, is like figuring out the balance and knowing that there's always another attempt, there's another chance, another try that's possible. Any closing thoughts or reflections? Just a question for you. If we did study Mussar more in depth, would you be interested in something like that if we had professional? Okay.
Absolutely.
So, great. Okay. We're working on that right now. We're approached by the Mussar Institute to pilot something. So that's good to know that there's, and it'll be a large thing. It'll be taught by the professionals. Next week, Rabbi Amy, I'll be away next week, but Rabbi Amy Pesa will be here, and she will be examining another trade. She has studied this more than I have. I don't know as long as the Leslie Ann from the Mussar Institute, but she has studied this more in depth and brought teachers to us as well. So it's just a great field. It is really only good. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. I hope you're able to find the balance in the spaces that you need to find balance, and you're able to fill the spaces that you need to fill, and just have a wonderful